We're going into a Brother electronic machine seeking an intermittent problem. And in aid of that, we're going to need to get out a part that people ask about all the time. Jack just moved it right there. It seems to be, some people call it an extra sponge bar, but it's not really retaining much. Mine's not in terrible shape. Sometimes they crumble to bits, although it's definitely showing its age. And there comes some crud on Jack's fingers. We think they are more...
That's what I wanted to show. That's a piece of the sponge. See how it's coming apart right there?
Yeah.
And that was caught between the spring comb and the needle over here on this end. If you'll come look, you'll come see.
So as they wear, they can create debris, in other words.
Right.
And since we're looking for an intermittent patterning problem, this is a matter of concern. As best we can tell, they were probably either to dull sound, so the machine was quieter, or mostly to help cushion this area in transit. Isn't that what we came up with?
Yeah, I really think it was a sound dampener, but look at this area right here. See how it looks like it's had a bite missing out of it?
Yum, yum.
All right, now back up a little bit. This is where I just touched it.
Mm-hmm.
And since this was loose, bouncing around in there, that means that, again, see, I touched it right there. I'll touch it again.
Yeah, this one is pretty much done for. And I'm seeing some debris that came from that on the underside.
Right.
So they can create debris, and we know quite a few people who've just removed them, cleaned out the debris, and the machine works fine. So as far as we know, that works, and that's probably what we'll do.
We've done it for other machines.
This machine was not mine from new. It was part of an estate find. And it was not very dirty in a general sense, really amazing for its age. But I think as I zero in here, you can see where that sponge has been shedding. And debris is never a good thing. We have our comb spring out of the bed now. This is something we removed because you saw the debris on it, and so did we. And it turns out that the areas that have been giving the most trouble are the ones with the most debris. And unfortunately, there seems to be a good bit of rust on it. So we're going to give it a good going over and see if we can get that off and if it makes a difference to the patterning. How are we going to get it off, sweetie?
I'm going to start with one of my cleaning wipes, and then we'll go to a very mild steel brush, and we may have to treat it chemically.
All right, we'll see you in a little bit. You're going to want to see this. We thought we'd do it off camera, but Jack is working with, what is this thing called?
Scrubs in a tub.
And we're getting astounding results. Look at the improvement. And it's not ready yet, but this is 2 minutes in. Here's what happened to our cleaning cloth. It's got a special chemical infusing it. And you can see the spring is very much nicer than it was, what Jack just covered up. But it's probably only about 80% clean. So what do we do next?
This is brand new cloth.
Right.
This is used cloth.
Very, very used. This is Jack toothbrushing the rest, but it's not really a toothbrush.
Yeah, it's a soft steel brush. And one of the things you have to be careful is we want to be flat on a table. We don't want to flex these guys, and you can see they will flex. What we want to do is really go back and forth along the line of the spring finger itself to try to get
When I ran my fingers along it, even after the film was no longer showing much debris, you could feel a lot of roughness, and that's what we're trying to get.
I'll try it.
Greatly improved. So we'll go down the whole thing.
Then we'll flip it over and do
that.
the other side.
Do you want to show them the damage time?
Yeah, it's perfectly obvious which one it is.
And that won't align correctly with the needle it's supposed to be pressing against, will it?
That's right. It's going to let that needle ride up a little bit, so we're going to try, when we go to put it back together, to flex it from the base here just a little bit till it lines up with the others.
And that could cause a single mispatterning needle, if I'm not mistaken.
It could.
Well, Jack is working. I'm going to remind those of you who watch a lot of our videos and restore a lot yourself, you've seen me working on one of these before in a Toyota machine, and it's functionally the same item, but as I remember, that comb was 2 pieces.
Yes, it was.
So the machines work very much alike, but not exactly, and this is one of the differences. I think we're done cleaning. We've done both sides, and it cleaned up better than we had dared hope. So mostly it does seem to have been encrusted debris, a little bit of surface rust, but it came off. Here's the comb reinserted into the gate peg bar. The tines are pointing towards us, I guess you'd call that. Here's the comb reinserted into the gate peg bar. The tines are pointing towards us, I guess you'd call that.
There's a mark on each one of these tines. There's a good one right there. It's just a little silver spot. And that's where the needle has run back and forth on the tine. So that tells
That'll help you get it oriented.
That tells you. Now, if it's a brand new one, you
won't have that.
Right.
With the needles out, you can see that the same deteriorated sponge is all underneath them and in the channel, so we'll need to clean that out too. There's another area that we found had stuff all in it, and we've pulled out a few big fuzz balls, but mostly little debris. We're knitting and wiping it down and dusting. We can do pretty good job on this upper edge, or the upside face, but the reverse of it is where we've been cleaning until just now, and there's not much of a way to get to that. A vacuum helps some, but is not a perfect solution. But this is the underside that we never get to look at when we're knitting, and it's looking as clean as the top now, so that's a nice place to start.
Okay, if you'll notice, I've got my hemostats in the middle because it's real easy to hold the spring comb in place while you see how it inserts into we've already shown you how it's into the gate peg bar assembly. And it's easy to hold the ends up so that they stay snugged. But that middle just wants to jump out every time you turn around. So we put the hemostats...
Got a clamp helping.
Yeah, in the middle. And then what I've done is returned the 3 screws that we marked with our marker because they were left when we took all of the brackets off. And these 3 screws are actually the alignment pegs for your sponge bar.
He didn't show you marking those because we were already deep in and didn't do that.
Yeah, well, I just whipped out the marker, but when you've taken all the brackets off, and we'll show you when we put them back on, these 3 screws will be left. And right now, they're holding my spring comb in proper alignment so that I can bolt it down. All right, what we've done is put the screws back in and put the nuts on the back of them, just hand tight. We have our handy dandy 6mm wrench to tighten them up when the time comes. But what we want to first do is get our brackets put on. This is fixed. This floats. And what I want to point out is that under these nuts, you can see it's a slotted groove. Now this one's not being used, and there's another one up here that's not being used, and then these are being used. But what that means is this gate peg bar will slide in and out slightly. There's actually a measured distance in the service book for how far the gate peg is extended from the edge of the bed. This part's easy for me. I just look at the slot and the marks where the screw was, but you see that one right there. I'll hold on to it. See how it's floating? I will wait until I get these brackets started, and then I will come back and make sure that the mark that the nut made when it was put on there is where I put it back.
And that should work in this case because the machine was knitting beautifully except for that one little anomaly.
Yes. This is in case you had to replace the gate peg bar, which we have had to do on one machine. So you put the gate peg bar on, then you'd need to know that critical distance that the gate pegs are supposed to be from the edge of the machine. And it's in the service manual. You could measure it and you could set it. The thing to do is set this end, then go and set the other end, and then line it up stepping towards the middle like you've seen us do on many objects. Alright, if you'll notice, we have a square peg, but it's on its points like a diamond. And then over here inside there's that same diamond shaped hole.
I would like to point out, since you last saw it, we've turned the machine. The gate pegs are now over here.
Okay, so in order to insert the card reader, electronic card reader, you match that up first so that it goes in, and then you can start on the other end lining up your screw holes like so.
Nice.
All right, here's what we talk about the fingerprints. See that little silver circle right there?
I'm gonna try to zoom on down.
On the metal. You can see the same thing here. Outside the slot, there's a little curve. This one shows up real well right there. You can see there's like a little sliver of a moon print on this gray metal that's a little shinier, and that's from the head of the screw. So you start them all very lightly like we've done, and then when you start to put the last couple in, you can see, does it need to move this way or that way, so that the head of this screw...
Can't see your screw. Got it. Okay.
All right, let me turn this around. The wide part of this screw will match the print that it left on this piece of metal. Screw is harder than the metal, and it's going into a piece of stainless. So when you pull it down tight, it makes a mark where the head goes into this softer metal. And we line up all of our brackets matching the footprints, the little fingerprint of each screw and the footprint of the bracket on the crossbars. And then when we're all on and we're all lined up, then we go back and tighten. All right, look at the mark on the silver. You can see where something has pressed into it, and you might over here see just a little bit of discoloration. Looks like a little triangle right there.
I sure do.
All right, and here is the same markings. There's our little triangle right there. This is our little round spot, so we know this is where that bracket went. And then of course here's our little fingerprints where the screws were. This is all in effort of showing you how to set the gate peg bar if you have to change one on a machine that's just been taken apart. You got all these little spots.
There are clues, in other words.
Yes. And again, look right here, and you can see a little ring around that one where the next bracket goes. So that's how we put it right back together the way it came apart. All right, once again, there's an oblong hole in the timing belt. There's a cutaway right there on the circumference of that drive cog. And this one is a little different on the 930 because it's not 4 little holes and 1 oblong. It's 2 little holes and an oblong. If you'll notice, here's one back here, and there is still a declivity in the outer circumference of that drive cog. So now it is properly timed.
So what he said when he said it's a little bit different, he means other brother models. They all have belts that fit on basically in this manner, but the timing is a little different.
Right. This one, the difference is on other Brother models that are not electronic, that are card readers, you have one oblong hole, 4 little round holes, and another oblong hole. I don't know if the camera can see, I'm trying to turn it. Yeah, there you go. See, oblong 1, 2, oblong 1, 2. On the card readers, it's an oblong, 4 little round holes, and another oblong. So that means this drive cog only has 2 declivities 180 degrees apart, because one oblong, 1, 2, 3, 4 little ones, and the next oblong comes up.
Watchers, I know that that is looking really dark. I'm going to move and try to get a picture just of it for you so that you get a better look at what that wheel looks like. Here we are, and I think it shows a little bit better. Jack's still wiggling the belt on, and you got to see it move. And you can see the cutouts he means. There's one of them looking at us right there. Is that correct, sweetie?
Yes. Right where this hole is, there's a cutaway in the outer circumference. Here, I'll bring the next one around. There it is.
And there it comes.
Yeah, cutaway and an oblong hole. So it's the same principle, and this is what I tell people. It's best to consult the service manual for your machine. It tells you how the hole pattern in the belt lines up with the outer circumference or the timing marks on the drive cog.
Here we are on the other end, and Jack is pointing out.
On the idler cog, left side of the machine, there's also an oblong hole and a cutaway to match it on the circumference of the wheel. We're going to go around and watch. Here's an oblong hole coming up right there, and there's the cutaway on the wheel. It's the same way, again, it's the same type of pattern for the idler cog on a card reader type Brother with a timing belt. So they have to both be set the same way. Here's what I want to point out about this. We all know that there's this little slide block underneath here that you have to take out in order to get the tension pulley to move towards the center of the machine, and it's spring-loaded away. But on this particular idler, you notice there's a half moon here, here, and here, and part of it is cut away on one of these holes. That's the only place you can get a screwdriver down through the wheel to take the screws in and out. And if you'll notice, I can get to this screw, and I have to back it up to get to the screw behind it. So just something to be looking out for. You can't reach through at an angle and get those screws in and out.
You'll just tear them up.
Yeah, on the rest of them, any one of these holes will do. But on this particular model, those holes, this is the only spot you can get the screwdriver through, so you got to jockey it back and forth.
We're almost ready to put our 930 back in the case, but we wanted to point out a couple things before we do. First of all, it needs a good wiping out, and that is because there was grease or some sort of lubricant in the machine, and gradually it migrates to the case at times.
This is the section where the cam rods are, and you can see the footprint of the brace right there, the little circles. And this is where the grease was put into the cam rod and the little feelers in there, and it's dripped down. So
over years in storage and use, but it's a smart idea to clean it up while we're in here, because if this machine were shipped or stored in any way except for correctly oriented, that could get back into something else.
Right. Let me point this out. This is what must be removed from the end cap. There's your on-off switch. There's your plug-in for your cord. And here is the fuse. If you'll notice, it's on one end of the wire for the on-off switch. So that a lot of times you'll see in the service manual, if you flip the switch and it doesn't light up the console, check the fuse. This is one of the fuses that we're talking about. There's also 2 on the console itself, but this is your power switch fuse. Alright, again, differences between this 930 and other Brother machines that we've been into. We're used to seeing the timing belt float in the back, but here, because of all the wiring that we have, you have this piece, which is a trough for the belt to run in. And what we're used to doing is lining up this bracket with its little hole where it goes into this piece on the case. There's a hole right in here. I don't know if the camera can see.
Yep.
Okay. We're used to lining that hole up, but now what we've got to do is line that hole up and then line it up.
The guide for the
with,
belt has
right,
to go
with the
too.
trough for the belt. And it's the same thing here. It's a little trickier. We're used to there being another screw and another brace right here. Notice this one arches up to support the console and hold it up out of the way. And so it's a little tricky. You got to have with your other hand holding the belt out of the way, lining up the screw hole with the screwdriver and the screw. All right, we notice there's a built-in trough for the timing belt, and this piece we've already had off once before, and it was to get and clean this cam rod. And again, it's going to go right back in, and it's going to line up with the holes. And we talked about this tab right here that's underneath, and it actually goes between the collar and the end of the rod, just like so. And then we line our holes up, we bolt it down. All right, again, 2 fuses right here on this plate at the bottom. These are your capacitors. But these 2 fuses right here, either one of them can go bad. And if you'll notice, there's your main power cord, 2 reds, 2 oranges. And all through this, we match things up by color. And if you'll notice, there's your release clip right there. And here's where the clip locks into. So it's pretty easy. It's a go, no-go situation. But now notice that when this is in place and it's pressed down, it makes it really hard to see those fuses. So just to let you know, if there's a fuse problem, and it will tell you in the service manual, this is where you need to look, get the console off, and look underneath here. Now, let's look at this plug-in. It's a pretty simple arrangement, this little plug in that little socket, this plug in that socket. They're not all the same size, but here's what you need to look at. This is round right there, but on this side there's a flat spot. And that's what you need to look for. It'll go in this way or that way, but you've got to look at the socket and see where that flat spot is in order to plug it in correctly. And each one of these is set up that way. You can see this socket has a solid side and a cutout side, but see there's your flat spot right there. So that's what you're looking at when you go to plug these back in. There's the flat spot on the socket. And so you're looking to match that to the flat spot on the plug. They pretty much go in just like they came out, and a little bit of looking will show you that, for instance, these holes are not centered on that plug. They're towards the top of the plug. And if you look at the socket, you'll see that the posts sticking out are towards the top of the socket. So it's a pretty no-brainer. Just plug them up just like they look like. All right, this is where we saw our fuse, and you'll notice that that slides in to 2 slots in the housing. So you slide that.
This is the right-hand end cap on the bed.
Yes, you slide that. Here's what you see right here. Here's your on-off switch.
Mm-hmm.
Now the on-off switch merely slides into its socket, and when this is in place, that's what holds it. But I'm going to bring your attention to the red straw. Boy, there's a lot of uses for those guys. And what I've done is put it from the outside edge right there. Now see, what we're trying to do is line up the plug for the cord. And you can see the head of the screw right here where my indicator is. The problem is, it's this silver metal piece, if the camera can see that. That's where the threads for the screw are. So that means this socket has to go all the way down in there, and the metal piece goes around the socket. Let me get where I can show you. And slides down to the edge of the casing. See, it's not wanting to behave itself at this time. And let me get it in place and we'll come back. Okay, you can see the screw, the thread in the end of the screw right there. It barely does bite down into that plate. And that's what I was saying earlier, is you have to run your finger down in this way, hold that plate up against the face of the socket. And with the red straw lining up one side, you can start the screw on the other side. When you get a bite and you pull it up close, then you can line this one up and tighten this screw. But it helps a lot to have an alignment tool. The red straw works as good as anything, because you've got to work down inside of there. And you see, I can put a finger in there, but then I've got to not look and turn it over, and it sure does help to have something to line it up. And here's our little plate, and it just slides into its socket. And this opening here is where your transformer lives. Okay, we're going to discuss similarities and differences again. If you've had a brother out of its case, you're used to seeing this brace and how it lines up with a tab in the casing. And this brace, only it's flat, and how it lines up with the tab in the casing. And here's a tricky spot. If the camera can look right down in here, they'll see a screw. And it's represented by this little cutout and that little cutout. And this is part of the case. And the thing is, this is the bracket that stays with the bed. And its two little ears have to go over a spot just like this on the case. And you can get those under. If you use it, we'll back up to this one over here. And I will take the screw out and I will show you that if this was a regular brother machine and not a 930 or an electronic machine.
So in other words, if it was a punch card.
Right. See, I'm going to slide this over, and you can see the bracket that stays with the bed, this part. And it goes into you can see right there, it goes over the top of a piece, this support, that's in the bed, in the casing. This stays with the bed, and it sits on a piece for the casing. And the screw goes right down in there and tightens up. Same thing here. This brace stays with the bed, and it sits down onto a piece of the casing, and the screw goes right down in through it. This one, this is the brace that stays with the bed. But what it's got is the ears for this have to go over the top of the machined piece with the case that has the threads in it. And it will tend to want to slip under that instead of over the top of it. And here you are trying to jockey both ends of the bed and get it into place. So before you put this channel in right here that we took the screw out of, these two screws go in first, then the channel. And the tricky part is the channel screws down into this brace and this brace you saw right here where we took the screw out. But this brace to the bed has to have its screws in. And then I don't know if the camera can get down in here, and I'll try to move the belt, but you can see me wiggling this guide because it's only sitting over the top of those two screw holes.
Okay.
So this is the first thing you do when you put the bed back in the case, and it's real easy to get it wrong. All right, this is the left end of the machine. This same strip on this end sits on the heatsink ground plate for the transformer. So it actually is grounding this whole end of the machine where your console lives.
And you definitely wouldn't want to omit that.
Yes. You'd want it to be in place, and you'd want it to be in place correctly. Now on this end, this one was loose because there's a little tiny crack right there in the housing. This one's pretty snug and won't fall out. But we think these nut plates are in pretty snugly too. However, they will fall out. So something to look for if you find a little flat piece of metal that doesn't have screw holes, threads cut into it.
It does matter.
It does matter, especially on this end. All right, this is our last piece of the cover, and of course, it can't be easy. This end actually goes into the end cap for the bed, and it has to go under this piece. Now here's your console and all your wires, and you very nicely plug them in and got them all tucked underneath the edge, and they're not in the belt. And we put one screw just barely caught the threads on this end, because this tucks under the switch area. Then we have to very carefully lift this up and nest them as we put them back down. And the thing to do, you see it wants to ride up. So and here's the problem. You've got a wire out of place in the back.
So you tucked it in.
Right, but that's what you have to do, is watch for the wiring in the back. It wants to go down in the trough for the timing belt, and we know that would be a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
So what we have to do is tuck it ahead of that trough.
And be real sensitive to the possibility that it's gotten caught somewhere.
That's right, but see now how it's laying nice and flat, and all I have to do is put my screws in.